And we're live. So I recently read a Facebook comment about Jeet Kune concepts people and how they always have something new to teach you, and also they are about learn it today and teach it tomorrow. So as a so-called JKD concepts guy, I thought I'd come on today, hopped up on cold medicine as I am, and talk a little bit about this thing called Jeet Kune concepts. Hello everyone, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast number 89. This is the one about this thing or a thing called Jeet Kune concepts. So as you're logging in, if you would be kind enough to say where you're logging in from and hit the like button, and feel free to continue hitting the like button throughout the course of the broadcast. Again, because I've said this before, but let me say it again. I am merely a Dan Inosanto student. He was my introduction to Jeet Kune, after all. Well, my live introduction. And I've been his student for over 35 years. But that does not make me a representative or a spokesman for Dan Inosanto and or the Inosanto Academy and or the Inosanto Instructor Association, okay? But I did use his logos today on the broadcast postcard because his name is synonymous with Bruce Lee. It is synonymous with Jeet Kune. His name is synonymous with the iconic nunchaku battle fight scene in Game of Death. And he is, after all, the creator of Jeet Kune concepts, which is like saying Bruce Lee is the creator of Jeet Kune, which any real JKD person knows is ludicrous. What both men did was to give a name to their ideas. In coming up with the term Jeet Kune concepts, Inosanto sought to illustrate the fact that the principles, the guidelines, whatever name you want to use for it, these elements of JKD could be found in other martial art methods or applied to or applied in other martial art methods. So it's one thing to have a high-minded ideal of showing the world how things are more closely connected or similar than not. So it's one thing to have that high-minded ideal, but it's an entirely different thing to pull it off. So Inosanto is known for saying words to the effect that Jeet Kune is not for everyone, right? AKA the masses, because of the tremendous amount of dedication and commitment that it requires. So some of his detractors might say, oh, well, he could be referring to himself, since they would be of the opinion that he has kind of given up on JKD and moved on to other things. But I would assert that by the time the term JKD concepts was coined in the 80s, Inosanto had already put in years of commitment and dedication to the Jeet Kune ideal. It had brought him a certain degree of renown and recognition. Again, his detractors might say it had brought him fame and fortune, but what do they know? But it had also brought concern and maybe even somewhat dissension. There's always been that concern over how exactly to ensure that Bruce Lee's art and philosophy is passed on the right way. So there were attempts at forming organizations which always sounded good in theory and always looked good at the outset, but then ultimately these organizations didn't fare that well in actual execution. So again, ultimately, it looks like the way to ensure that Bruce Lee's art and philosophy is correctly passed on will be through the efforts of particular individuals, which shouldn't really be too surprising if that ultimately is the way to do it, since that's really the whole way that the thing started, right? If you think about it, yes, Bruce Lee was the spearhead behind or of Jeet Kune, but that was a result of years of influence from different sources and different individuals as well. So it is said that Bruce Lee researched, many different martial arts. You'll hear that, right? Bruce Lee studied a bunch of different martial arts or researched a bunch of different martial arts. And if what is meant by that is that he had an extensive library, right? He had a ton of reading materials on different topics. Then yes, he did study a bunch of different things. He did research a ton, but he certainly didn't train in a ton of different arts with a ton of different instructors, or even a ton of different instructors in one art. The person who did that is Dan Inosanto. So for example, Inosanto has, Rob Kelly just came on. Rob Kelly could verify some of this. Inosanto has over 30 instructors in just Filipino martial art. About 8 instructors he's done stuff with in Wing Chun, right? About 5 different instructors in Pencak Silat, right? And maybe 6 or 7 in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and on and on and on and on, right? And so the question is, well, why would he do that? Some will say that he enjoys being a student as much, even if not more, than being an instructor. And perhaps they are correct in that, right? Perhaps he enjoys learning so-called new stuff. But what if what he's really doing is continuing to reinforce the belief that ultimately in martial art, like I said before, there's more commonality than difference. And maybe the thing is that he wants people to experience this as well and learn it for themselves. So he goes out and does the studying, and then he comes and he shares what he's discovering with his people. And also, whenever possible, he ensures that his people can have direct access to the very people under whom he's studying. So again, I referenced Rob Kelly. Rob and I, that's how we got access to people like Chai Surisu. That's how we got access to people like Pendekar Paul de Toires. That's how we got access to people like Professor Salem Asli. Right? This is why at one time there were multiple different disciplines being taught under the roof, the single roof of the Inosanto Academy. Right? But now, who's going to control how people on the receiving end react to this level of opportunity? It's not really Dan Inosanto's responsibility to tell people how to approach all this material. It's kind of like his if he cares to, it's his responsibility to put it there and then let people sample and do their own thing. So this is where individual effort comes into play, right? So going back to the idea of Jeet Kune Do not being for the masses, if people forget that in JKD, the development of what we call the educated eye is of paramount importance, then they might fall victim to another thing that we call the shiny object syndrome. And so they jump around from one art to the other in an attempt to collect as much different information as they can. So then if they did that, then they'd be missing the point, and they'd be violating some, let's call it, important JKD ethics, right? Like the daily decrease versus the daily increase, right? They certainly would not be, if you're jumping around from one art to the other, you're not dedicating yourself to the deep level understanding of combat, combat strategies, combat tactics, because you're too caught up in accumulating like different techniques or technique sequences or what have you, right? This series thing that we keep hearing about. And since your training is so externally focused, you probably would not be spending any time on internal cultivation. And so you would not be using Jeet Kune Do as a vehicle for personal liberation, so to speak, right? So what's the solution? What's needed? So here's one of my suggestions. Recognize that Inosanto's personal path does not have to be your personal JKD path. Just because he's training something doesn't mean that you have to train in it as well, or even train in it the same way that he does, right? And also recognize that when you're on the receiving end of Inosanto material, what you're getting is his distillation and his compilation of the material. But his seminar material doesn't have to become your curriculum material. And obviously I'm talking primarily to Inosanto instructors, right? Or any instructor who's on the receiving end of Inosanto stuff. It is up to that individual instructor to, in a similar fashion, go through and research the same way that Bruce Lee and Dan Inosanto did their research, so that you can come up with your own conclusions as to what works for you. And you definitely will not be alone, since there are many of us on that path. Maybe there are not as many as there should be, but there's definitely a lot of JKD people out there on the correct path. And you certainly will not lack for material, since there's a plethora of Jeet Kune material available for you out there. But you still have to keep your ears, your discerning ears and eyes open, because we are in pursuit of acquiring the educated eye, right? So you still have to keep your eyes and ears open in pursuit of truth, and you have to be dedicated to your own personal development, right? So you take in as much as you can, you run it through your own filtering system, and then you distill it down or distill it out in your own approach and your take on things, right? And along the way, I'll be here to help with the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast and the Jeet Kune dialogues, and in any other way that I can be of assistance to people. All right? Okay, that is it for today. Feel free, share, like, comment, ask questions. I'll review everything after posting. Sign up for notifications for when we go live on Facebook, and also when we post the final edit videos on the YouTube and back here on Facebook. For both the broadcast, the dialogues, and the new, it's taken a little while to get it up and running, but it will be the FMA files, right? Follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods, on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods. At ilovejeetkundo.com, the Quick Skills Series Volume 1 is available. Coming up this evening, August 14th, at 6 p.m. I'll be back on, since I'm traveling this weekend, so there will be no Friday program of the Jeet Kune Dialogues. I'll be on this evening, 6 p.m. with Bob Landers of Bob Landers Jeet Kune. He is a Ted Wong guy. And next Monday, there will be another episode of the Jeet Kune Dialogues, but it won't be on camera here on Facebook, so I'll record that and put it up for you maybe on Tuesday of next week, right? But come back at 6 p.m. and hang out with Bob Landers and me, and then I'll see you back here next week, same time, for another issue of the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. Today is Indigo Day. That's the t-shirt. Right? And I'll see you next time. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.